that created a strong enough weaponry that hand-to-hand combat, shield, sword. And they would have, there was a gorge that would lead in at a very strategic point to take Sparta, and they knew it. And they just held a narrow gorge where only a few men could enter at a time, and the Spartans could have one-on-one. They didn't have to face the huge army and get surrounded. They had to go one-on-one. And it was just such a killing field of the Persian army. It was stacks of men dead through this canyon, and they won.
And the Spartans had such incredible stamina.
Yep.
And they would trade up and they would move forward and back like phalanxes to get to spell each other. And they've been fighting. How long did they train?
From the time of childhood, and they were also, it would be considered infamous for weeding out the weaklings. So if an infant was born with any imperfection, certainly nothing we know of today like Down syndrome or anything obvious at the time of birth, they would just be taken from the mother and thrown in a pit. So they would only allow the strongest to survive. And from the time they were little children, they created a very warlike culture. Everything had to do with it. They would have women lovers because they knew they had to propagate the species. But one of the secrets of the Spartan success is they had homosexual lovers among the men who would fight side by side and be shamed if they were even injured, let alone killed in front of their lover. So they would fight that hard to keep their face, save face, basically. And that's one of the keys to Spartan success. And our military academies to this day, as well as the Nazis, studied these strategies because they were looking for any advantage where a small army could defeat a large. And the Nazis almost did it technologically with the backward engineering craft and other technologies that had been gleaned.
Well, I know that the Nazis developed the Blitzkrieg.
Yep.
And in 1939, they tested it against the Spanish in Guernica.
Yeah.
So do you remember that battle?
I sure
how that
do.
went?
Picasso did a very famous painting of the battle, and that's in the Basque territory too. And it was one of the first displays of the Nazis bombing civilians. They also started that in Poland when the invasion came. And so the way that they were blanket bombed in World War II, because I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but I read a great historical book about World War I. Germany went unscathed in World War I. There was a front line along France where all the damage was done. So it wasn't until World War II, their ancient medieval towns in Germany were wiped out. And whole cities like Nuremberg, gone, which was like a Prague. It was so beautiful. It's gone. I've been, of course, through Germany and seen the reconstructed cities, and you'd be very hard-pressed to find anything that has remained. It's very sad. But there is one city, Heidelberg, Germany, that was like Kyoto, Japan, and I lived in Kyoto when I taught English, that the Allies just didn't bomb because it was so historical, so beautiful. And in the case of Japan, they were all wooden cities, and one fire incendiary bombing wiped out huge swaths of Tokyo and other cities.
Well, I remember in Hanover, the capital of Hanover has a gold dome on top of it. It's huge. And Hanover kind of sits in the clouds and the fog. And so when the bombers would come in to make their raids, the American bombers, because they bombed during the daytime, what would happen is the lead bombardier would set his sights on that gold dome, and then they would make their turn and tell all the planes to drop their bombs at the same time. That's why they never bombed that capital, because that was their mark for calibrating the bombardiers.
Yeah. And one time they dropped a payload on Prague, the only city's damaged, and they thought it was Nuremberg. And they had this turn all the lights off policy when they knew the planes were coming, but I guess a few people didn't get the memo and left their planes on. Right in the old downtown section, there's a couple buildings they almost proudly point out that's the only damage that has been done in Prague, and it's a great city.
I remember walking around Hanover and seeing buildings that had a plaque on the side of it that said built in 1254, rebuilt in 1948.
Wow.
And what would happen is they bombed it, blew the bricks all over the place. Then the locals came and they gathered up all the bricks and rebuilt that building.
Wow. Same bricks too. They actually did that in Japan too with all the castles. that got blown out. I lived in Kyoto for 14 months as an English teacher, so I was saying all my niceties to Yuko at the conference. Arigatou gozaimashita, ohayo gozaimasu, do itashimashite. And she just loved it. Japanese love to hear that language. And I got to travel all over, all 4 islands of Japan, and those cities also decimated. I've been to Hiroshima twice, and the famous atomic dome is a testimony for the folly of man, dropping bombs and just wiping out a city. But really the fire bombs of World War II over Japan did the most amount of damage. And
yeah, because all the buildings were made of wood.
And they had to rebuild all the shogun castles, which were the medieval rulers over Japan. And only a few remain, and the few that do are really amazing, including one in downtown Kyoto where I lived.
I lived in Japan in the north, and I was actually not far from Fukushima, and I toured that plant twice.
No way.
While it was running. So it was the only really operational cesium plant in the world.
Wow.
But they gave great tours, so I actually toured that plant twice before it was destroyed.
Now it's infamous, like Chernobyl.
Oh, man. I mean, it's dumped so much nuclear waste in the Pacific Ocean.
So sad.
It's changed the planet.
As we were talking today, you can't even eat fish out of the Pacific anymore too safely. It's pretty much over. Wow,
yeah.
That sucks.
We didn't eat shrimp out
Way
of
to
the
go,
Gulf.
humans. You're really preserving the largest ocean in the planet. Woohoo!
All right. My friend Brad Olsen.
Hey, guys.
Fukushima raised the temperature.